Today, we're getting into a stack of sources you sent us. Some really compelling neurobiology studies, some foundational policy reviews.
Yeah, some great material.
And we're using them to, well, to cut right through the noise around substance use disorder.
Mm-hmm.
We've said before that recovery is complicated, but these sources, they really show why. And it all boils down to this one profound idea that I think changes everything.
It really does.
So our mission today is to understand how that external judgment and the internal guilt, stigma, and shame can literally stop recovery in its tracks.
Yeah.
And here's what we found. The problem isn't only the substance, it's what happens inside you after you use.
That is the crucial pivot. It really is. What we're doing here is translating the science of chronic stress, of brain adaptation, into insights you can actually use.
Right.
The brain disease model of addiction, which is, backed by decades of neuroscience, tells us that it involves these huge changes in the brain's circuitry.
The actual wiring.
The wiring, exactly. The systems for motivation, emotion, and crucially, self-regulation. So we're going to explore how social things like stigma can hijack those already impaired systems and just make the disease worse.
Okay, so let's unpack stigma first.
Yeah.
It's much more than just a bad feeling, right? What are the two faces of stigma the sources talk about?
Yeah, it's a devastating barrier to health, and it exists on a spectrum. So first you have social stigma.
Okay, the external stuff.
The external stuff, judgment, discrimination in housing or jobs, criminalization, all of that. Then you have the internal stigma.
Which is shame.
Which is shame, that overwhelming feeling of self-blame. And the sources are, they're crystal clear. Stigma, internal or external, it prevents three things you need for recovery.
Three things. What are they?
Okay, so people either don't seek treatment in the first place,
right,
or they don't get the social support they need. And the third one, and this is so important, is that the treatment they do get, it fails.
It fails because it's ignoring the biology.
Exactly. It's ignoring the very neurobiological mechanisms we're about to discuss.
So the shame isn't just like a side effect of the illness. It's an active part of it. It's sabotaging the process of getting better. How? How does that internal judgment physically connect to the body?
It creates this catastrophic feedback loop, a self-perpetuating one. To get it, you have to understand that chronic substance use has already thrown the body's master stress system out of whack.
The HPA axis, right?
The HPA axis, the hyperthalamic pituitary adrenal axis.
Okay, can we simplify that? So if the HPA axis is the master controller for stress, what does that dysregulation actually feel like for someone trying to quit? Is it like being in fight or flight all the time?
In essence, yes. That's a great way to put it. Chronic use leads to constantly high levels of stress hormones, like corticotropin releasing factor.
And that's the alarm bell.
It's the alarm bell telling your brain and body you are in danger. And this constant state of alarm, the stress dysregulation, that's the scientific reason for that awful emotional state people feel during abstinence. Researchers sometimes call it the dark side of addiction.
Dark side.
Yeah. It's defined by things like dysphoria, just a profound chronic state of unease.
And anhedonia.
Anhedonia, that's the inability to feel pleasure from normal stuff, right?
Exactly. From things like food or seeing friends or hobbies, things that used to bring you joy.
So the brain is actively shutting down joy. It's not just that the substance is more appealing, it's that the whole system for natural pleasure has been chemically broken and reset to this miserable baseline.
That's a brilliant way to say it. The system is miserable. It's running hot, and it's looking for a quick fix.
Yes.
And then this is where the toxic role of internal stigma of shame comes in.
Clip, moment one. Shame as toxic stress, the biological price. See, stress is a massive physiological input. It's not just a feeling. And shame, this chronic, inescapable internal stress, the constant self-judgment, it acts just like toxic stress or trauma.
So it's feeding the fire.
It's like pouring gasoline on it. It feeds directly into that already hypersensitive, dysregulated HPA axis. The sources confirm this. They show that toxic stress contributes in a huge way to things like PTSD and, to addiction itself.
So by constantly judging themselves, a person they're effectively keeping their body in that state of emergency, the one that fuels the desire to escape.
Precisely.
The brain is screaming, I am unsafe and miserable, and shame is just turning up the volume on that scream. It makes the need to use feel chemical, not moral.
Yes. The judgment itself chemically reinforces the need to escape.
Okay, so let's move from the stress response to the brain's control center. If shame is stress, and stress is messing up the HPA axis, how does that physically increase the risk of relapse?
For that, we have to talk about the brain's executive functions. This is all happening in the prefrontal cortex, the PFC.
The CEO of the brain.
The CEO of the brain, exactly. It governs planning, decision-making, emotion regulation, and inhibitory control.
That's the brakes. The ability to stop yourself.
That's the brakes. If you're fighting a craving, it is everything. It's your last line of defense. And the sources show that PFC dysfunction, it's a critical finding in chronic substance use. It's a strong predictor of relapse.
So what does shame do to the CEO's office?
It overwhelms it. When stress and shame spike, the signals from that HPA axis just flood the PFC with emergency hormones.
So if stress and shame are disabling the PFC, how can anyone be expected to rely on willpower? I mean, is willpower physically impossible in that moment?
To a very large degree, yes.
Yeah.
You can't just rationally think your way out of a craving when the part of your brain built for rational control is, already impaired and basically drowning in stress chemicals.
The brain's already running at a deficit.
It is. And shame just adds more pressure, making that rational choice extremely difficult. And this is made so much worse by co-occurring conditions.
The research shows a really dangerous triangle there, doesn't it?
It does. Things like depression and anxiety, which are so often fueled by shame and isolation, they actually mediate the relationship between stress and substance problems.
So high stress leads to anxiety, which then leads to more substance use.
That's the cycle. So targeting shame and these mood disorders isn't like a secondary issue. It's central to breaking the biological cycle.
This moves us right into that whole public narrative. The idea that addiction is just a moral failure or weak will. We have some stats here that just completely counter that.
We have to. To combat the shame, you have to talk about the genetics. The sources point to really high heritability rates. Addiction has a strong genetic component.
How strong?
For cocaine use disorder, it can be as high as 72%.
72%.
Yeah. And for alcohol use disorder, it's in the range of 49 to 59%.
Wow. That is massive. I mean, if we treated that like any other chronic illness with a strong genetic link, like heart disease, it changes everything. How we fund treatment, how we talk about personal responsibility.
It underlines the biological predisposition. And just look at the numbers. The vast majority of people who use a substance, say 52% of American adults who drink alcohol, they don't develop an addiction.
Right.
Only a small fraction, maybe 10% of those who drink, develop the disorder. So that reality makes it basically impossible to argue that it's just about free will.
Clip moment 2. The myth of simple choice. Focus on etiology.
Right.
So if the science shows it's up to 72% genetic, and the whole system is biologically compromised by stress, then using the language of choice and failure starts to feel, well, fundamentally dishonest.
It is. The scientific consensus is that social solutions like shame, blame, criminalization, they largely fail because they ignore the underlying etiology.
The brain change.
The persistent brain changes. That's what classifies addiction as a chronic brain disease. So treatments have to address the chemical and structural problems, not a perceived lack of morality.
Which leads us perfectly into the language we use. If the science is this clear, then our language has to evolve to match it.
Absolutely. And this isn't just about being, politically correct or polite. It's about reinforcing the scientific reality to actually help recovery. Language shapes perception, and perception shapes policy.
So what's the modern, precise term we should be using?
The field now uses substance use disorder, or SUD. It recognizes that this is a chronic, progressive disease that exists on a spectrum of severity. It's a move away from those older, loaded terms like abuse.
And a big part of this is adopting person-first language. What are some of the terms we need to just get rid of, and what should we say instead?
The whole point is to shift the focus from identity to condition. So instead of calling someone an addict or an abuser,
You'd say
a person with a substance use disorder. It separates the person from the illness. And we also need to drop language like clean or dirty for drug tests.
Right. You wouldn't ask someone if they were clean from diabetes.
You wouldn't. You'd say they're in recovery or the test result was positive or negative. It's about taking the moral judgment out of the language and treating it like any other chronic medical condition.
In this shift, it's not just theoretical. It's had a real-world impact on people getting access to care.
It has, a huge one. All this evidence that this is a disease rooted in brain changes was instrumental in supporting new laws.
Clip moment 3. Policy follows science.
I mean, the brain disease model was fundamental to passing policies like the Mental Health Parity and Addiction Equity Act of 2008.
Or that too.
It mandated that insurance coverage for substance use disorders had to be equal to coverage for physical illnesses. It forced the system to align with the medical view of addiction.
So it directly improved access to treatment.
Directly. And reduced discrimination in healthcare. Language and science changed policy, which changed lives.
That's the big picture. Let's bring it back to the individual who might be listening right now, grappling with that intense shame. We've established that shame is toxic stress, and it overpowers the PFC, the CEO of the brain. So how do we give the CEO a break? What are two practical tools they can use right now?
Okay, so effective treatments like CBT work by actively rebuilding these impaired brain systems. These two tools are sort of like first aid. Simple, immediate actions to interrupt that physiological loop of shame and stress. They're PFC exercises for a moment of crisis.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, what's tool number one?
Tool one is the shame interrupt script. When shame flares up, it's activating the emotional reactive parts of your brain. You need a cognitive intercept, a single powerful sentence to pull your PFC back online.
To get the CEO back in the room.
Exactly.
Right.
The goal is to label the feeling as a symptom, not a personal failure.
And what's the sentence, based on the biology we've talked about?
The internal script is this. This feeling is my dysregulated stress system, not a moral failure. By repeating that, you're labeling the physical sensation, the HPA axis running hot, and you're reframing it. You're immediately introducing a factual medical reason for the feeling.
That feels powerful. It creates some distance.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and tool number two. That addresses the isolation that stigma causes.
Right. That's tool two, the support microplan. Stigma drives people into isolation, but support is absolutely critical. This plan counters that impulse to hide when you're feeling intense craving or shame. It has to be simple, low effort.
Because the PFC is already impaired.
Exactly. You can't have a complicated plan for a crisis, so it has three parts, and you set them up before a crisis hits.
Okay, what are they?
Who? One trusted, non-judgmental person who knows the plan. When? At the very first sign of intense negative feelings, not when it's already a full-blown emergency. And how? A pre-agreed, super low-effort way to make contact.
Like a code word.
A code word is perfect. A text with just one word, like red, that means, hey, I need a connection right now, no questions asked. It automates the action of reaching out before shame can talk you out of it.
That's incredibly practical. Okay, we have to add a necessary disclaimer here. We're providing education and insight, not medical advice.
Absolutely. These tools are for immediate coping, for insight, but recovery from substance use disorder requires targeted, comprehensive clinical care. That can mean medication, behavioral therapies. It has to be tailored to the individual. If you are struggling, please seek professional support. This is a treatable chronic illness.
So what does this all mean for you? The main insight from this deep dive is that stigma isn't just a social problem. It is a profound, measurable, biological barrier to getting well. When we choose to look at addiction through that clear neuroscientific lens, as a chronic disease affecting the brain's control and stress systems, we start to dismantle that barrier, and that unlocks the real path to recovery.
Well said.
We've drawn on a deep stack research today. The full sources are available in the description. And if you want a simple list of those person-first language changes we talked about, just comment language wherever you're listening.